Why don't we go ahead and get started if that's all right? So I'm Lisa Tillman, and I'm a tenured full professor at Rollins College, where I have
Mm.
taught since 1999. Um, this is for me, and I suspect for all of us, an unprecedented time in higher education and an unprecedented time in my own career. I'm at a private liberal arts college, which puts me further from the front lines than my colleagues at public colleges and universities. I think we are assuming that we have some kind of firewall between us and the Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump perpetrated nonsense going on. But I don't think any of us is all too certain of how solid or how permeable that firewall is. But Rachel, would you want to maybe introduce yourself, and then maybe Stephanie can also introduce herself?
Sure. My name is Rachel Silverman. I am currently an assistant professor at Boise State University. I moved here from Florida 2 years ago, where I gave up tenure. I was also at a private school, but one that was very much in line with what DeSantis was doing. Um, so I did not feel that firewall that Lisa is talking about. And while I'm aware that Idaho is not known for its progressive politics, Boise State is, and Boise is, and there was some hope that as Idaho is a rapidly growing state, some of those politics might change for the better. Um, some of the more, well, last year, some of the more aggressive right-wing stuff had been shot down, but as of late, that's not so much the case. But I'm still hopeful. And left Florida because it wasn't not just professionally, but personally, it had become an unsafe space for my family.
Okay, Rachel, thanks. Stephanie, are you ready?
Hello. I actually have Lori Peterson on the phone and she's trying to get in. So I'll let you know. She's in. Okay, I'm hanging up with her. There we go. Hello, I'm Stephanie Martinez, and I actually live in Austin, Texas, and teach at St. Edward's University. And I came about this project because Dr. Peterson and I had wrote a paper previously. And of course, because we live in Texas, that alone has been a challenge. Just, oh, she's calling me back. That has been a challenge lately. So I'll just introduce myself there and I'll see what's going on with Lori. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Lori was going to give a brief overview of the project, but I will try to do it justice here. The edited collection that we have put together, as you saw from the program description, is called The War Unwoke. And we have chapter drafts from, I think, 15 different authors representing multiple states, most of them red states, but not all of them, representing different ranks from graduate teaching assistants, assistant professors, tenured associate professors, full professors, and then also representing private colleges and universities, publics, and including a submission from an HBCU professor. And I think we were all kind of living in the aftermath of what had been happening in states like Florida, where I live, and where our co-editor Nicole Richter lives, and then, of course, in states like Texas, where Lori Peterson and Stephanie Martinez live and teach. And so we wanted diverse voices. We wanted evocative narratives that would really take readers deeply into the experience of being on or near the front lines in the war on woke, and what is this translating into as we navigate classroom assignments, syllabi, conversations, what's happening on our campuses, how are we trying to do activism individually, collectively on our campuses, and then also beyond the boundaries of our campus. And so from there, we're going to take you briefly into kind of the national context, and Rachel's going to talk to us about that. That's coming next. I'm going to give you a little bit, for some of you, this is likely a review, but of the context here in Florida. And hopefully Lori, and maybe not, if Lori's not able to, maybe Stephanie can talk to us a bit about the Texas context. We're going to give very brief descriptions of our own chapters, and then we're hoping there will be some time left for you to ask questions, and maybe even more importantly, to share your own stories about how you're navigating this in your autoethnographic and narrative work, and how you're navigating this as a teacher, a scholar, and a public servant. But with that, if it's okay.
Lisa, Lori is here.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hi,
Lori,
Lisa.
hi, Lori,
Hi.
Is there anything you want to add in terms of the project description before we turn it over to Rachel to say something
Yeah,
about?
no, I think you covered it well, and I'll just briefly introduce myself. Lori Peterson, co-editor with Lisa. I teach at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. So we too are a private institution, and trying to navigate what we can and can't do and say. So that's why we're here.
Awesome, great, thanks, Lori. All right, Rachel, we'll turn it back to you to give us some of the national context, which we could probably have an entire conference on just the first weeks of this new administration. So thanks for covering that for us.
Sure. Thank you. I just wrote a little piece. So what began with the presidential action to fly the flag of the United States at full staff on Inauguration Day, regardless of it being within 30 days of President Jimmy Carter's death, soon deteriorated into making February 9th Gulf of America Day and the abolition of paper straws just one day later. The new administration's executive orders have not only been a whirlwind, but a series of frightening and devastating decline in human rights, some of which include, but are not limited to, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing, enforcing the Hyde Amendment, the establishment of the White House Faith Office, protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship, keeping men out of women's sports, defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. And of course, ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling, which includes, quote, instilling a patriotic admiration for our incredible nation and the values for which we stand, which will prevent innocent children from adopting identities as either victims or oppressors solely based on their skin color, and prevent young men and women from being made to question whether they were born in the wrong body, and whether to view their parents and their reality as enemies to be blamed. And also to prevent teachers from, quote, steering students towards surgical and chemical manipulation without parental consent or involvement, or allowing males access to private spaces designated for females. Much of this is what culminated in the February 4th Dear Colleague letter, which will force universities receiving federal funding to, quote, enforce Title IX only under the provisions of the 2020 Title IX rule that does not include the protections for transgender students, including inclusive bathroom and locker room policies. It will also, quote, cease using race, color, or national origin as a factor in admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, scholarships, prizes, administrative support, sanctions, discipline, and beyond, i.e., it is the end to all DEI initiatives. And while I know my portion was about national coverage, I couldn't help as a local Idahoan to mention our state's recent attempt to repeal marriage equality, or how at a recent town hall in Coeur d'Alene, a woman was forcibly removed by 3 plainclothes security workers. Or at a recent engineers conference, the CEO enacted the now all too common Nazi salute. And so with that, I will give Stephanie a chance to discuss what's happening in Texas.
All right. Very similar things, unfortunately. As far as the war on the woke in Texas, we also had basically in education, Texas has passed laws restricting race and gender discussed in public schools and universities. The state's banned DEI offices in public colleges and universities. Library books have been banned, any kind of topics related to race, sexuality, and gender identity. We've also had issues as far as corporate policies and DEI initiatives in Texas. Besides Senate Bill 17, we've pushed back against environmental, social investing, basically saying that financial decisions shouldn't be influenced by social politics, so bad environmentalism. Some state leaders are also criticizing major corporations that are promoting any kind of inclusion and diversity initiatives within the state. The state has passed restrictions on transgender healthcare for minors. There's been efforts to limit any kind of drag performances and restrict discussions of LGBTQ plus issues in schools in Texas. Our local and state governments in places like Austin and Houston are often threatened by the rest of the state with losing any kind of funding. Transgender athletes have been stopped from competing in sports aligned with their gender identity through Senate Bill 15, which actually happened in 2023. And Texas leaders such as Greg Abbott argue that these laws are protecting women, while most critics see them as discriminatory. And of course, any kind of things like political activism, such as Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ plus pride initiatives, those are criticized. We had an incident actually happen at our school where we had to take, I don't know if we had to, but we don't have to. We took down our pride flag and students protested it and it was brought back, but we were never told why it was taken down. And so it's created a lot of people being scared in our state because you can be reported on for doing things. And I have some friends who teach at state institutions who have had to take everything related to DEI out of their syllabi and out of some of their lessons because they can be reported on and they can be fired and they actually can be blackballed from teaching in the state. And so this is happening every day. So I'll leave it there.
Can I just piggyback on that, Stephanie?
Sure.
Add a couple of things. I mean, we just keep getting this flood of information. I'm sure we're all so sick of it that we have to unplug. But most recently, I'm not sure if you saw it, but Texas A&M has banned drag shows on all of their state campuses. So that was the most recent bit. Another interesting thing regarding colleagues that teach at state universities, we had a former student, Stephanie, I'm not sure if you know who it was, that is a professor now. I ran into him at NCA, not this past year, but the year before. And I said, how is all of this, hitting you and landing for you? Because he teaches the same things we do, family communication. And he said that he had a script that he has to read to his class before there are any potentially controversial topics. And he says, I just want you all to know that you are not compelled to learn this material. So it's beyond ridiculous. So
Thank you, Lori and Stephanie. I'm just going to give maybe 3 minutes of snapshots from Florida. And again, many of you may be familiar with this context. And so the catastrophically bad legislation on this front in Florida arguably began in 2021. So on June 22nd of that year, Governor Ron DeSantis signs into law House Bill 233, which empowers students of public colleges and universities to record class meetings without an instructor's knowledge or consent. These recordings may then be used as evidence in institutional complaints and legal filings. This bill carves out an exception to state law, which requires two-party consent to record. And all of this makes me think, well, because, you know, the biggest threats to personal and public safety are not rising authoritarianism and fascism, climate change and poverty, but instead college and university class lectures, activities, and discussions. March 25th of 2022, DeSantis signs House Bill 1467. This transfers power from teachers, librarians, and individual parents to activist school boards and extremist groups like Moms for Liberty, Moms for No One's But Their Own Liberty. Florida now leads the country in banning books. PEN America documented 3,362 book bans in 2022-2023. This was an increase of 33% over the prior academic year. These bans remove student access to over 1,500 unique book titles whose authors, as you might expect, are disproportionately female, people of color, and or LGBTQ+ identified. Banned books include, no surprise here either, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, an irony not lost on feminist educators as we watched our forced birther representatives enact a 15-week and then a 6-week abortion ban. March 28th, 2022, DeSantis signs House Bill 1557, which prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in grades K through 3, and mandates that discussion at all other grade levels be age and developmentally appropriate, left purposefully, I'd say, undefined. April 19, 2022, DeSantis signed Senate Bill 7044, which weakens tenure protections for faculty at public colleges and universities. And then just 3 days later, DeSantis signs House Bill 7, Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act. I'm sure you've heard of this, Stop Woke. This bans the teaching of so-called divisive concepts like critical race theory at Florida public schools, K through 12, as well as colleges and universities. DeSantis recently announced that he is creating a Florida version of what Elon Musk is doing federally. And then, as Rachel previewed, that Dear Colleague letter went out to all colleges and universities in the country, giving us 2 weeks to basically eliminate all things DEI or lose access to federal funding, which could include Pell Grants. And so I give him credit, the president of my institution last week at a meeting said that they did not consider this a lawful order. And our intention would be that if we are told that parts of it are within the law, that we will do as little as possible, as slowly as possible. So those are just a few snapshots from Florida. And then each of us is going to give you just like a brief 2-minute snapshot of the chapter that we're composing. Rachel, would you want to go first?
Sure. Lisa, I actually had a question for you in all of that because I recently left Florida and a private school. Part of why I left that school was because it was framed to us, not just state schools, but any private schools taking state money as well. So all of the rules that Lisa outlined
Yeah.
were to be applicable to the private school where I taught because we took significant state money.
Well, and I think this is probably what is on the minds of boards of trustees and senior administrators in Florida and states like Florida. What is it that applies specifically to public colleges and universities? And what is it applies to any institution that takes state money and federal money, which I would think is all institutions. And so again, we're not as close to the front lines as our colleagues at the Florida Publics, but we don't know long-term what this means and to what degree we are going to be asked to comply with policy that's not congruent with our mission. We're coming to year 3 at the end of the DEIB strategic plan that our president and other senior administrators have just continued to march forward with despite all of these legislative changes. And so we're all kind of in the state of collective not knowing exactly what all of this is going to mean.
Gotcha.
But go ahead, Rachel, are you ready to tell us a little bit about your chapter?
Sure. So even with everything going on, I chose to frame my chapter as a story of hope. I titled it Feminism on the Front Lines, and in it I detail the process of developing and then teaching a class called Gender Communication and Difference during the fall of 2024 in a state that in January 2024, so just the year before, it passed House Bill 421, which offers a highly restrictive definition for the term sex and gender in the Idaho Code, equating them solely with the elementary definition of biological sex. So in my chapter, I focus on both the regular and exceptional moments when my students demonstrated their potential for change and growth. I talked about everything I did, excuse me, leading up to the course, but really it's about the students and what they did in class. And so I thought today I would just highlight some of those moments of hope to bring some hope to this panel. A class discussion where some cisgendered women for the first time really realize the amount of work they do to look the way they do and the amount of money they spend to look the way they do and began to question it. A moment after a class where we had been discussing the concept of housewives and we had read Betty Friedan's The Problem, or parts of Betty Friedan's Problem That Has No Name, The Housewives Dilemma, when an Army veteran came up to me and revealed his epiphany during class that his stay-at-home wife might be bored, that staying home with their 2-year-old after having a career in the military might not be as fulfilling as he imagined it was for her. And then weeks later came and very excitedly told me about the date that he was taking her on, which was the first date they had been on in about a year and a half. I tell the story of when my university forfeited against San Jose State after a trans athlete had been forcibly outed by her roommate. We were one of many schools to forfeit playing her San Jose State, and our governor praised the university's decision. And I use this as an opportunity to bring it into class and talk about what it is to have trans athletes in sports, and was repeatedly surprised by my students' ability to question the ruling, question the decision, to realize how much of the issue of trans women in sports was nothing but media hype and picking on people that don't need to be picked on. And similar to, I think, what Lori or Stephanie said, I've repeatedly in this class sort of taken that moment to say, these are theories. These are ideas. You do not have to believe or accept any of this. And part of that was because prior to the semester starting, I attended a academic mama's happy hour and there met with a woman who's in charge of educational policy on campus. And we talked about the lawsuit that had happened a few years ago after Idaho banned abortion. And when some Idaho State professors sued the state about their ability to teach about abortion. And what came out was what many of us probably have dealt with in some ways, that as faculty, we can't teach students what they have to believe. We can't force them to believe anything. We can only teach them ideas. And so I found myself throughout the semester reminding the students, these are ideas. They're not anything they have to believe. But I felt very lucky to see how many of them chose to believe it. And that really by the end of teaching the class, I felt hopeful. Even though I know many of my students voted in a way that I wish they hadn't, I still feel quite hopeful that these local Idaho students are seeing things in a new way through the course about gender and communication. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rachel. All right, Lori and Stephanie, can you talk to us about your project?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started, and then Stephanie can pick up. So this is a presentation that Stephanie and I actually did at this conference a couple of years ago. It was specifically about abortion and abortion rights. In Texas, we have none. No exceptions for rape or incest, and abortion is banned starting at 6 weeks, I think. It was actually before the whole 6-week thing, I believe, was put into practice, or maybe it wasn't. But anyway, it was entitled Ranting and Raging for Our Daughters. Stephanie and I both have adult daughters, and just thinking about the world that they grow up in, as opposed to the world that we grew up in. But not only that, our students, who, many of us, we feel like they are our children of sorts. And so we are revising the chapter to include our students and what we can and cannot say. Every year, since the abortion ban, when I go have my annual checkup at my gynecologist, I point blank ask her, what's going on? She said, well, my job is very difficult now. And 2 years ago, I said, what do you say when someone comes in here and says, this is an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy? And at first she said, I tell them to Google that. And then last year when I went, I asked her again. I said, are we still telling people to Google? And she said, honestly, Lori, I don't even know if I can say Google that anymore. Yeah, so translating that into the classroom, I have found myself so outspoken. Stephanie and I both teach at the same institution. We are a Catholic liberal arts university. But interestingly, we have a colleague who teaches 2 classes. One is LGBTQ literature. She's a literature professor. And the other one is classes entitled Banned Books. And so, of course, those classes are full. So it's really a bizarre kind of world to exist in, like with the Catholicism, but we are social justice Catholicism, and the Texas stuff that's going on, knowing what we can and can't say. I am finding myself, I can't believe how many times this semester I advised students, go buy Plan B. Stock up on Plan B. Do you have your Plan B? Do you have because that'll be targeted next. That's the next target, and so just working through what we can and can't say in class. Stephanie and I are talking through that in our chapter. So, Steph, you want to pick it up?
Sure. I know I only have a couple minutes. I will just say that I went to the University of Chicago last summer for its Parisia conference. If anybody's interested, you should look into it because it's a great conference. And that concept is the idea of fearless speech, and it's obviously rooted in ancient Greece and developed later by Foucault. But I really felt in going to this conference last summer, after all this was happening, and meeting with other people who were dealing with some of these same things, that we still have to guard that act as being so precious and so important. And especially Lori and I teaching in basically a faith-based institution, which is even more complicated. But I feel like we even have more of a moral responsibility to engage that fearless speech and foster critical dialogue. And so I've been embracing that even more, like Lori has. And so for instance, I had someone come to my class who's a DEI specialist, and talk about that this semester. And I have, I talk about I have a feminist perspectives class. We talk about abortion rights, and I feel that I'm doing it more and more because I have the freedom to do that being in a liberal arts college and faith-based and social justice institution. And I look at people who can't do it in the state schools. And so I feel like I'm jumping in there even more. And so I feel that together, we're just going to have to create a future where our voices and truth and justice still prevail over oppression and silence. And Lori and I are trying to work through that in our chapter.
Great, thank you. And then the chapter that I have been developing has been a work in progress over the last 3 years, and I've actually presented excerpts of that at this conference and also at ICQI. My chapter is called The White Woman Professor. Some of you know the backstory to this, but April 29th of 2022, after that legislative barrage that I described earlier, so this is 1 week after the signing of Stop Woke, and it's day 2 of final exams at Rollins College, where I teach in Winter Park, Florida. Via campus email, the editors of a student publication circulate a link to their latest issue. The publication is an official campus organization, but it is not one affiliated with student media. The issue contains an anonymous, which becomes very important in the unfolding of this saga, an anonymous 489-word smear titled The White Woman Professor. It spotlights 3 professors, including me, by department, course title, and name, mine spelled incorrectly. Without evidence, Anonymous accuses us of violating the anti-racist ethos of our courses by committing unspecified racial microaggressions against them, Anonymous, or someone they know. The public shaming concludes by critiquing the college itself for employing us and awarding us tenure, and then branding us as either, quote, incompetent and ignorant, or willfully racist, end quote. Reflecting on this experience, I question the dangerous dynamics within even some progressive circles, a performative call out and cancel culture that undermines solidarity and collective action by conflating discomfort with danger and ideological purity with justice. Drawing upon Adrienne Marie Brown and Loretta Ross, I advocate for a shift from calling out to calling in, emphasizing accountability and repair rather than public shaming. Ultimately, the chapter warns of the costs, personal, institutional, and societal, when progressives adopt oppressive tactics mirroring the authoritarian forces we seek to dismantle. The incident becomes not just a cautionary tale, but a catalyst for policy reform aimed at preventing future misuse of institutional channels for defamation and intimidation, underscoring the necessity of aligning our methods with our vision for transformative justice. All right, so that's just a brief snapshot of my chapter. And so from there, we will solicit your questions, comments, and maybe especially stories of what this might be meaning to you in the classroom, on campus, in the community.
Yeah, we're very interested in your interest in this panel? And is it because you live in a place or work at an institution where you're experiencing this? And especially if you're international, we're really interested in your perspective on what is happening in the American university. I can't say in America because
Right.
we don't have enough time, but in the American university.
I thought I saw someone's hand, but maybe I did not. Okay.
I had my hand up, so I don't know if you.
Yes, please,
Is that
Wendy. go
okay?
ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, thank you for these stories, the hopeful ones and the scary ones. They're all good because it motivates action and thoughts. And I love the thought about what you said just now about the calling in rather than calling out, making that the practice, and that being, it brings me to the thought of using different words for inclusion, the idea of calling in. And so I'm a social work professor, and in my syllabus, literally all of those divisive topics are listed one by one. This week we're talking about intersectionality. This week we're talking, and so on. So it's literally impossible to stay true to the accrediting bodies, the Council on Social Work Education, that says you must talk about these things, stay in the value system of social work, and then at the same time not be allowed federally. In Ohio, it's State Bill 8 that's going on now. So having those dual allegiances to values of the profession, pressure from outside. So, I think that for me, that's my big struggle. Like, I know what I need to teach as a social worker, and it's exactly all of those concepts that were listed as divisive concepts. So finding new words is what I'm trying to do, like talking about the same things I always talked about, but using like a materialist critique instead of saying intersectionality. And then saying, today we're going to put on the materialist critique glasses. Tomorrow we're going to put on these and so everyone in the room has to speak from these lenses. It's not just me telling them something, but so there's just different ways that I'm trying to, so that we can continue talking about all of these really important theories and lenses and not get fired so quickly or get in trouble. So I've been on the DEI committee of our social work department. And now we're thinking, okay, what can we call ourselves? Do the exact same thing that we've always done, but use different words, different language. So those are some of my experiences, and I'm sure others have similar ones. I've already heard some.
Wendy, thank you. And Carolyn, I've seen your hand, and Art, I've seen your hand. Carolyn, do you want to go first?
Yeah, yes, we can, because we're hosts, we can't do the function, the raise hand function, so we have to just wave. But I wanted to say that, I'm not in a university now, thankfully, but because I'm not, I feel like I have to really use my voice because I am as protected as one can be. Now, next month, I may not get my Social Security, but I'm not going to lose my job. So I really want to speak out. And I like to wear my shirts, my nasty woman shirt. And there is a rally right on the corner up from our house at 5 o'clock today. And we will make sure to be there along with Mary Poole and some other people in the neighborhood. And I just want to encourage people to keep doing what you think you can do, whether it's calling your representatives, which really there are ways to do it that only takes minutes of your time. Go to rallies. I'm going to go with my Ukraine flag hanging, and we got to just keep doing what we can do. We got to try to speak out when we can and protect the people who really can't speak out at this moment.
Thank you, Carolyn. Art, please. And I think you might still be on mute.
thank you for this panel. It certainly does make me appreciate my status as a retired professor, and gives me a reason to look back with greater pleasure than I would otherwise at the good old days. I'm sorry that you're all having to go through this. I do wonder, in terms of this book project, if another, and maybe you're doing this, I don't know what the introduction to the book will be like. Maybe you could talk about that, Lisa. But these two terms, DEI and woke, have been successfully transformed by the far right. And I've heard few, if any, attempts to provide counter narratives to the far right narrative, especially on DEI. And to allow, for example, the Trump administration to nominate at least 12 to 15 people for heads of institutions who could not have qualified in any university program or search committee that I ever was on, simply on merit. Not a single one qualified, and even the questioning of candidates for these positions never focused on their resumes. They focused on everything but the resume, on what they might do when the inevitable was going to happen, when they were going to be appointed. So is there anything you can do in your book, in your scholarship, or your teaching to reclaim DEI, or at least provide counter narratives to the one that seems so successfully disseminated throughout our culture?
Thank you for that, Art. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this as well. And in his otherwise heartening remarks last week, the president of Rollins wondered aloud whether we should pivot away from language like DEI or DEIB. And I hesitate to simply surrender the narrative to the right. And so I would say our vision for the introduction to the book will do some of the things that we tried to do very briefly in this panel, like the national context, some of the state level context, and then how that's filtering down to colleges and universities. But I think addressing a vision for how we might reclaim the narrative, because I agree with you, it's been successfully co-opted and fundamentally undermined. And people who do the work that we do have not been particularly successful in kind of infiltrating the narrative. And part of that may be the way that we're all kind of micro-targeted and siloed off from one another now, and we're not really communicating all that meaningfully across political divides. So, but I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Laura, is there anything you would add?
Yeah, I would say somewhere in our introduction, though, we will, I mean, undoubtedly, because we have not done the introduction chapter yet, we will undoubtedly define our terms and talk about what that means, and yeah, and maybe in a conclusion, are there new ways that we can reframe this? Other than what's already being done, which is just renaming things like belonging. And, I think we have an office of, I think we preemptively, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, started renaming things on campus, even though we're not,
Even though
under-
we're not under the same
like
legal-
our chief diversity officer changed her title preemptively. So looking at,
because she was
how we
scared. She said she was already getting threats,
yeah,
personal threats.
I mean, I've read things going around social media, like when somebody says something about DEI, we need to ask them, what is it that you don't like? Is it diversity? Is it equity? Or is it inclusion? Or is it belonging? I have not had that conversation with anybody. I don't know how productive that would be. But definitely these terms have been completely co-opted and demonized.
Now I'm seeing we are officially out of time, but we do still have Chris and Mark with their hands up. Tony, do we have time?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Chris, why don't you go first?
Just real quickly, I appreciate this and thank you for the invitation to be a part of this project. I enjoyed it. It's interesting, you know, the other day I Googled what novels are most like what we are living through now. And the first hit was, of course, 1984, followed by Brave New World, Handmaid's Tale, and a whole range of other dystopian hellscape novels and movies that I read, never thinking they would be manuals for living. When I was young, right? All the science fiction stuff and all that stuff. I never thought we'd actually live in those times. But now, you know, I live in a gerrymandered red state, which really is a purple state, which really ought to be more blue than red. The populations of the cities are much different from the populations out in the country. And so we haven't had a firewall because I'm at a public university like you described, but it's been slower moving in North Carolina than it was in places like Florida and Texas. But recently, this semester, in the middle of the semester, the state system came out with a mandate that we remove all diversity, equity, and inclusion things from the mandatory curriculum, which, as someone already pointed out, that gave a real problem to the social work department. For the rest of the university, there's a category in general education called diversity and equity, which was just wholesale eliminated right in the middle of a semester. So we're seeing the meddling in ways that we never thought would be possible. There's language scrubbing, but I've said to my colleagues and anybody who will listen, the day they come into my classroom and tell me I can't say anything that I want to say is the day I quote the governor of Maine, I'll see you in court, because I am not going to stand down because these people have, I think, Art, it's more of a weaponization than a co-opting of that language, and it's unreflective at best. They did it with critical race theory too. They have no concept of what any of this stuff is. So I'm infuriated, and I do like to point out that in my piece I pointed out that the origin of the term woke comes from a blues singer from the 1940s who was telling his fellow black citizens to be careful, you could get lynched. That's what woke meant, be aware. So anyway, thank you for the panel. I appreciate this.
Thank you, Chris. And we're looking forward to the completion of your chapter and including it in the collection. That's exciting. Mark, we'll give you the last word.
Okay, thank you. You wanted some international comments, so I'm happy to oblige from Chester in the UK. Yeah, I've found it very, very interesting and mixture of inspiring and obviously disturbing, some of the stories there. And just wanted to add a couple of things. One, some colleagues have already mentioned how there was already self-censorship in elements of autoethnography, that staff were punished or feared being punished if they wrote about toxic environments where they were working. So that's one question to point out. You know, we've already had a degree of this, and you know, why did we allow that, and what do we learn from that, and the fact there was a modus vivendi despite that self-censorship. So that's the first one. The second one, more hopeful note, is that at our university they wanted to record lectures, and as union reps we were involved in policy making, and we managed to stop it being a kind of a default response. So it's a little bit more bespoke. The cameras are still in the rooms, but they're not switched on, and some people do actually pull the wires out. But anyway, but the policy is that we don't have to be recorded, and that was only because of union intervention in the policy. And then thirdly, the other sort of hopeful suggestion is that, as perhaps we've seen with Columbia University and elsewhere, that students, faculty, and retired faculty can be a kind of useful triumvirate against Trump. So I think we can also draw some inspiration from the pro-Palestinian anti-genocide protests as well, that can give us some energy going forward. Over and out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
And Tony, Art, Carolyn, and everyone else involved, we just want to thank you for making space for this discussion. We really appreciate being included. We're very pro inclusion, including inclusion. So thank you. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all.